Hi, Melissa. How are you doing?
I'm very good. Thanks, Celia. It was a great panel indeed just before. I hope I'll fulfill expectation going on this amazing summit. Thanks again for inviting me for building this panel on the question of diversity and inclusion. I'm Melissa. I'm a UX specialist and advocate for diversity and inclusion, and I have the honor and the privilege to welcome two amazing guests, two trailblazers regarding diversity in inclusion. So we have the luck to have with us Jessica Murrey, who is the CEO and co-founder of Weekend Saint Studios. She already worked over 7 years for one of the largest peace building non-profit organization. She was training young activists on social change communication, and she recently joined the gaming industry with building games that are built to have some fun experiences to prompt behaviors and change for real world action. Hello, Jessica. Welcome, welcome to the panel. I don't see yet if there is Rebecca here with us as well. Great. Hi, Rebecca. So I have the luck as well to welcome Rebecca with us, another trailblazer in the diversity and inclusion question. Rebecca is a senior UI designer, but she's also famous for building two non-profit organizations that are really important for the Montreal game industry. One specifically supporting women called Pixel. She's the co-founder and director of this organization, but also the founder and director of Game and Color, supporting people of color in the gaming industry. Welcome to these two amazing guests. I'm so excited to have you here. Hope you're well. How are you doing?
Good, good, ready.
Amazing. So, as we probably all know, and also our participants and attendees, so diversity and inclusion is becoming big in gaming. So last year, was really meaningful to raise voices regarding the subject, and there's some initiative regarding diversity and inclusion in the non-corporate world, but also starting as well to happen in the corporate world. I wanted to ask you, as so many voices are raised, how, regardless of the position of the industry, would you think about how to build an allyship? I would ask you, maybe Rebecca, to start on this aspect, regardless of your position in the industry. How do you have any tips to become an ally on those issues?
Yeah, so if you're new and you're eager to support your underrepresented colleagues, I would suggest the very first step is to listen and learn. There is so many free resources out there, so many wonderful, thoughtful pieces on allyship, how to learn, local communities. These are all really, really good places to start. And there's an acronym by Carolyn Persil, I think her name is, called LEAP. So there are 4 steps to this. You can listen and learn, embody all of the learnings that you have, the data, the history, understand your place in the context of these experiences that you've learned about, and change like what you call your Rolodex, like the people you know and the people you professionally come in contact with every day. There's A for action. So you start conversations with your fellow allies, and you signal boost, you ask leaders what you can do as an ally to help them. And then you start prioritizing equity, giving people access to equal opportunities. It's not just equality, but really access is an important step towards equality.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed, it's true that it seems that there is a really actual work to grow this empathy. We have to rationalize how to grow this empathy. Jessica, you've been working on very, very difficult context. How do you relate to allyship, in countries where some very political situation might be very difficult, and how we have to grow this in games? How do you relate to this new industry and how to become an ally?
Yes, no, absolutely. So first of all, everything that Rebecca said, like yes on all of that. And I actually just wanted to lean into that a little bit because it's what's so amazing is that, so yes, I've been in the peace building field but I like to call it that we're common ground activists. So it's basically all about attacking the problem instead of the person. And there's so much crossover here. So for example, for reconciliation to happen, so if we're talking about race and reconciliation, in order for healing to start, there has to be an acknowledgement of pain and often wrongdoing in order to move forward and actually make, to heal. And so this is across everything. So this deals with race, this deals with, situations that we have, conflicts that we have in the Middle East to Africa and everywhere, here, when you're having an argument with your significant other, there has to be an acknowledgement of pain and wrongdoing. It's just across the board. And I think oftentimes a barrier to that is having some of these tough conversations. There's like, oh, like, how do I ask? How do I, like, I want to help, I don't know where to start. And so I often encourage people just to like acknowledge it. And so that just means sitting and listening, like Rebecca's saying. Oftentimes we try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and be like, oh yeah, I had an experience like that, but it's really not what it's about. It's about just like letting them have their moment, taking yourself out of it and just being there. And that is so important. And I think a barrier to this oftentimes is race-based stress. So if you're hearing us talk about this and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm already getting like anxious, like that is totally natural and normal. So I just want to say that's okay to feel uncomfortable. And oftentimes we feel uncomfortable and people react differently to it. You can feel guilty, you can pull away and avoid, or maybe get defensive. Some people even get angry. And basically what race-based stress is it's, if you are a minority, oftentimes you're always aware of your color, which is very stressful, right? Like you could walk into a room and it could change the whole dynamic of the room. You have to be extra careful about the tone you use, the things you say, what you wear. You're always aware of it if you're in the grocery store, if you're in the workplace. And so you're constantly surrounded by race-based stress. If you are in the majority, you don't have to think about your race on every single little thing you do. And so when you're faced with race-based stress, it's really uncomfortable. And so sometimes you don't know what to do with it. So oftentimes race-based stress is a barrier to keeping us from reaching out or listening or engaging. And so I just want to encourage folks, like if you're feeling uncomfortable about this, it's okay. All you have to do is listen and be there to start. And that's just kind of the starting place. And then there's a lot of other things, of course, that we can do to be allies. But I just wanted to like hone in on like that starting place because I think it's so important.
It's great indeed, because from what I hear, it's clear that it starts with, understanding each other, letting have the moment and listening. And of course, we have to accept the fact that there is an emotional charge to this dialogue, that it's coming in. And of course, for so many that were not used to talk about this subject, because obviously the growth of the time, spent on talking about this subject is amazing since the last months and very recent years. So we have to let this emotional charge, accept it, and not take it maybe personally. Is it also what I hear from what you say?
Yes, absolutely. Because we tend to put ourselves in everything. And so sometimes we may feel attacked because we feel uncomfortable. And so if we feel attacked, we assume someone's attacking me. Or if I feel guilty, I assume someone's trying to make me feel guilty. But if you take yourself out of it, you're like, actually, what if they're not attacking me? What if they're just trying to share their story and their experience? And it's important that they have the opportunity to do that. And I can be a better friend by just being here. And so absolutely, we want to put ourselves in it all the time. I mean, we do this with, like, oh, that friend's mad at me because she hasn't called me in a week, but it's like, actually, she just has a lot of stuff going on. So it's always good in conflict to try to take yourself out of it as much as possible, but be aware of your emotions, but know that you always have the power in how you respond, no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Rebecca, what's your take on this emotional charge that is weighing on the start of the dialogue? In the gaming industry, the dialogue is maybe less recent, or let's say less democratized since very long. How do you feel about that? What's your take on this aspect of the subject?
I feel like we've been having these dialogues for a very, very long time. And the fact that people view this as we're having more and more of it, it's just becoming more and more normalized, that we're comfortable speaking out, that we are finding these platforms to come together and support each other and make our voices louder. Like, the more louder we are, the more we can hear and spread like our experiences and have other people learn about our experiences. And as an ally, like Jessica mentioned, it is really important to take a step back and assess whether my friend is being angry because she's just angry at the entire situation, at the system, at the structure, at the glass ceiling she's constantly hitting against. She's not really mad at me as like an ally. And it's really important, even if you are being defensive, you can always stop yourself and be like, oh, I'm sorry. I was being emotional in this situation, and admitting that you're making a mistake. And making mistakes is part of how we grow and how we reassess ourselves as allies. And Todd Harper had a really good talk on what to do if you're being called out as an ally. So reading up on how to apologize is also a really important step to being an ally.
Yes, indeed. Yes, that really makes it for, okay, I have to be comfortable with my emotion because I'm always, for example, stress based on race-based stress, as you mentioned, Jessica, but it's also important also to close the dialogue with an apology or an acknowledgement that there was a particular emotional charge for the listener to not feel attacked or guilty of something that is not yet his fault. Is that right? Yeah. Great. So, okay, so the dialogue starts. Now, as you already worked a lot on this subject on both, very different environment. What are the barriers? When this dialogue starts, what are the barriers that we started to evoke some of them with the start of the dialogue from both sides, having someone to listen, but also being very stressed about things. But what are the other barriers that you encountered with trying to build on diverse and inclusive initiative? What is your maybe we start with Jessica and then, go focused on the video game industry with Rebecca. So Jessica.
Yeah, definitely. So I think oftentimes what we end up doing is we kind of look around the room and we say like, I think this happens a lot of times if you're a woman or if you're a person of color or whatever, you're like, okay, you look in the room and like, oh, this is pretty good, and so one thing that we sometimes tend to not do is sometimes look deeper than that. So like, who can't get in the room? And I think this is a big issue, it's issue for games, issue for tech, everyone is making sure that we get opportunities. So we find out who can't get in the room and make a way for them to get in the room. And so, your economic status is a big deal. A lot of times if you're a person of color, what ends up happening is that you need basically what we call qualifiers. So if you go to like a fancy school, if you go to a Harvard or a Stanford or something like that, that's a qualifier. And so people see that you're a person of color, but they also say like, oh, they went to MIT, like they're good. And so oftentimes, or you win awards, and so that's like a qualifier, so someone can say like, oh, but a lot of people of color don't get the benefit of the doubt and they can't afford to go to these kind of schools. And so so it's important to think of who can't get in the room and how do we create a pipeline so that they do. So things like paid internships, I think, are a big deal. I had a paid internship and very grateful for, I had a sports scholarship and a paid internship. that set me up with a lot of privilege, as well as even, some unconscious things like the way I talk. I grew up in a mostly white community. And so when people don't even know that they feel comfortable because I know all the ins and outs of like how I speak and my mannerisms. And so be aware of that unconscious bias as well. If someone has cultural differences and they speak a little bit differently and their clothes look a little bit different, we tend to judge folks. And so just being aware of how we can access talent and pull talent. And to me, it's not a charity, because I feel like sometimes we're like, oh, I'm going to do this to be like a good person, but it's actually better for your business. Like difference can be a pathway to innovation. Like as soon as you can get more perspectives, every good story has adversity, it has underdogs, and you're going to get a lot of those experiences and perspectives coming from different people of color and all different types of backgrounds. And so I literally think that it is a strength, and it's not just a charity thing of like, oh, we need to be good people and get on this line. Like, it's actually when you are finding, and there's different groups that are pulling these young people up, when you find them, able to get them in the pipeline, actually work with them, truly be an ally, qualify them through you, help them achieve what they need and partner with them, it's going to actually make your business and your game and your storytelling and your UX better.
So it's really about giving opportunities to people we can get into the room. It's true that we talk about diversity. It's not only about representativity or representation. It's also about how do we give those people the opportunity. Is that something that relates as well to the video game industry, Rebecca, for you?
Yeah, so what we see very often in the games industry, and my head was just like falling off, nodding to what Jessica said, is that people are still complaining that there are not enough candidates applying to these positions, saying that there's not enough junior people applying or people holding themselves back. So we're seeing a pipeline problem, but as well, the pipeline further down the line is also a problem, the leaky pipeline problem, where we have seniors leaving the games industry because of the glass ceiling, because of harassment, because they're tired of hitting a brick wall over and over and over. So we have like a ton of underrepresented people trying to get in, but a ton leaving. So there's also a lack of mentorship and sponsorship happening to help bring up younger people. But I wouldn't necessarily say younger, but more junior people as well. So yes, I agree that the games industry has very much these same problems.
Basically, the barrier are not only to have people in the room, but then once they're in the room, giving them the support to give them the right, managerial support, would you say? So we talk about sponsorship, mentorship. So that should come maybe from management. Did you ever encounter barriers to develop this kind of mentorship or some sponsorship for management? I don't know if, for instance, they might be maybe ignorant of some privileges they have in order to really advocate and engage on those initiatives. What do you think? What's your take about that, Jessica?
Yes. So I know that I have personally benefited from mentorship a ton. So it's why I am where I am is because I had people that took time to, build up my confidence. They took time to say like, hey, how's your annual planning going? Can I look at your annual plan? And actually very constructive, tough love, constructive. And I knew that there were allies in the room when I was presenting ideas. So, it's also about making space for people and knowing that you have an ally in the room. And so when you present an idea, you have someone that is going to be paying attention that other people listen to as well. It's so easy to skip over people and their ideas, and you have the personalities in the room that are just going to go and run off. And so, you present your idea and say like, hey, Sue, what do you think about that? And you just start creating space for people in rooms, making introductions for people, you know, giving resources and things like that. Like if you were, there's so many different ways to be an ally. I have our game that we have that we're working on right now is World Reborn. And so it's an interactive story game where you play the story within the game, and then you get to play the hero, and then you get to unlock missions to do in real life to actually be a hero. And I have an incredible interactive story game writer who's just like donating time to me once a week, about an hour, to just like go through with me about my character development and you know, my and doing reading out loud and things like just things like that. And that kind of stuff just like sticks with someone, and it will make me more successful because he has donated his time. And so there's a lot of ways to mentor, even if you're like, oh, like how can I be a mentor? I'm just like, you know, it's you have a skill set, and if someone else is hungry and willing, and is able to take that constructive feedback, like it's invaluable to them.
It's really great to really emphasize on the fact that on all problems that we evoked since the beginning of this panel, it's really two sides needed. So it's not about people are like guilty or privileged one doing their job. It's a common and collective work about accepting, acknowledging, and acting on it. I'm really like the ideas that it's a collective work all together. So we're in the same boat. We try to advance from where we are and to contribute to something better. What's your take, Rebecca, on that?
Yes. So I think it's really, really important support and backup from our allies. And we use the word ally a lot, but here I think it's really important to underline a difference between ally and accomplice. An accomplice is someone who will take action, who won't. If I'm in the middle of a meeting and someone is constantly interrupting, an ally will take me aside after and say, wow, that really sucked. But an accomplice will interrupt the interrupter and say, you know, Rebecca's been trying to talk. Why don't we let her finish her ideas? So I really, really want to see more accomplices in the games industry and just everywhere in general. And an accomplice can be just your peer. An accomplice can be a manager. And it can be really scary to be the one to speak up, to leverage my privilege to help someone else. But the more we do it, the easier it is to get, and the more normalized it is to stick up for someone, to be their backup, and to actually have other people's voices be heard.
That's a really good point, because indeed there are some managers who want to help and are just, I don't know how. I want to help. I want to hire a more diverse team, but once they are with this team, they struggle to really bring up their people, and you know, at the same, you know, with the same level of opportunities, etc. So it's a really good point to have some advice for managers who have maybe, yes, to be an accomplice. The reason why I say that is because it seems that when developing, you know, diversity and inclusion, those people you're talking about, managers, they actually have a tremendous power to change, right? What's your take on that, Jessica?
Yeah. Yes, no, I mean, and I love what Rebecca's saying about accomplice, because that is, I mean, that I've personally had both, and both feel great. Like I've been interrupted a lot in a meeting and not known why. I didn't feel great about the meeting, and then coming down, and I was also it was like my first job. It was my first job out of college. I was working for a television station, and I had this whole idea. My boss was going to have me present it, and the meeting finished, and I had no idea why I didn't feel good about it. And I came back down, and my boss was like, he's like, how did you feel about that? And I was like, oh, it was okay. And he was like, do you notice how they kept interrupting you? And I was like, okay, like that must be it. And he goes, if it happens again, like I'm taking their head off. And there was like this, like, I'm like a peace builder and there's like a very like graphic thing, but in that moment, I was just like so empowered, like, oh my gosh, this person has my back. And it like made me feel like, no, that's right. Like, I'm not gonna let anyone interrupt me anymore. And then, and then I've had people actually step in and be like, hey, I think, so it's such a small thing to do, but it's something when it happens, it just is like, and now, because I mean, I've been a young woman of color now I'm like 33, so I'm not as young, but I've been like, I mean, I'm still kind of young, maybe. I'm gonna get myself in trouble. Okay, I need to stop talking. So, I've been this for a while, and it's amazing to see, because there's that moment of time has stuck with me. And so that happened when I was 24, and now I'm 33. And to this day, that boss is like a mentor of mine. I was only in that job for a year, and it gave me confidence to be in management positions and really know my worth and how to handle myself. And so you never know what like a small moment as a manager is going to really stick with someone and really shape someone, because like how people treat you is a big deal. And it also helps you stand up for yourself. And so those little things really stick with people, and you never know how just like a small action like that, and if you miss the moment, it's okay. Like if you miss the moment in that moment, to go back afterwards and be like, hey, I see you, I see what happened, and just like that acknowledgement, and like, and like, I'm going to do better from now on. That's like just like a great feeling, so don't feel bad if you miss those moments. It's great if you do it in the moment, of course, but even afterwards, it's just a great feeling, and, really, really build people up. See, someone says still young. Thank you.
Yes, yes, I hope so. Yeah. We have someone in the chat. So James, I guess, it's scrolling, but James, thank you so much. And indeed, he says that basically giving the opportunity and support to someone is also a gift to yourself. From a neurological perspective, I totally agree, but I will let Rebecca also jump on that aspect of the conversation about being an accomplice. What does it bring to this actual accomplice in the matter?
Yeah, so I 100% agree that having accomplices in your corner is an amazing feeling. It just takes away a lot of pressure on yourself as the only in a room and the only person in a meeting, for you to always be the one speaking up, to always be the one to have to like, hey, that, this joke is really weird. Maybe you shouldn't say these kinds of jokes, guys. Having someone else going like, hey, that's not cool, or I don't understand what you mean by like women aren't great at shooters. Like, what is that? And like helping the person giving these jokes just reframe their context. And maybe it'll like turn on a light in a manager to say like, whoa, my culture, the team culture that I curated has allowed these kind of jokes to pervade like our everyday conversations. And that'll give an opportunity to managers to potentially step back, to reassess and be like, okay, I need to intervene. I need to make sure the only person of color on my team, the only non-binary person, the only disabled person on my team feels also welcome. And this way together, we can all perform better. We can creatively solve better. We can make better games together instead of in fear, instead of in frustration, and eventually even leaving that game studio, leaving that team.
Yeah, that's unfortunately what could happen. Sometimes when one would raise an issue about even just a bad joke from something a bit more, profound, as someone who is not given the right opportunity, etc. Sometimes potential accomplices, even they would perceive the good out of their action, are still, fearing for themselves about what it will mean, around their, network, etc. They're afraid to be as, one would be, even if the victim of any kind of discrimination would be, to pass for like troublemaker or something. How would you respond to that, Jessica? Is there any way to kind of bypass this obstacle of just being afraid to sense any kind of retaliation for already a built network of manager or so?
Yeah, no, it's all about how you do it, right? Like, and this is something that we work in our story games, because you can disagree with someone and you can do it in a way that, like, everything's a double-edged sword. Like, you can use humor to de-escalate a situation, or you can use humor to mock someone. You can like step in and be an ally and do it in a way that like shames somebody, that makes them feel really bad and kind of demonizes them, or you can like kind of pose a question, like I think I'm seeing that a lot on the chat. Like, posing a question is a really great way if you're like, hey, I'm not trying, because we have a lot of woke warriors, which is amazing. But sometimes what ends up happening is that we actually like push people away that we need to bring on board. So, I could, so we often talk about like, our whole lives we've been taught someone has to lose in order for us to win. But like, what if you switch your objective from making them lose to, okay, I'm gonna make them an ally, I'm gonna prevent or stop harm, and I'm gonna solve a problem. It totally changes the way that we treat and talk to each other. So like, I could call someone a racist and win my argument, throw it on the mic, win it. But is that person any more likely to want to help me? And most likely not. And that's probably the person I need most if I want my son to grow up. And like, that's the person I need if my son's standing in his friend's front yard, not waiting on his friend, not to call the cops to say like, hey, there's some strange person out here loitering in our neighborhood. Like, that's the person I need most. And so I think it's always important to have in mind, like, when you engage in this way, like, okay, like, I have a different objective in mind. Like, I want to get this person to reflect on what they just said. That's, or like, instead of going with the 1-2 punch, which could leave things very awkward. So just really having an environment where it's like, okay, we're going to not attack each other. We're going to attack the problems. We will make mistakes. So we'll have grace for each other, and we will listen, and just trying to foster that kind of environment. And take things off the table. Like, we're not going to attack each other. We're not going to call names, and if it happens, then you're able to acknowledge it and have grace for that person. You don't have to label that person, because I think this is where the fear comes in. We often in peace building talk about push and pull factors of extremism. So things that push people outside of society and leave them vulnerable to being recruited and pulled into extremism. Because if you're always feeling attacked, one, you have to ask yourself, am I really being attacked, or am I just hearing stories that are uncomfortable? But if we actually are attacking people, they're just going to pull away and go someplace in their own echo chamber where someone is going to make them feel okay for their thoughts and words that might not be appropriate or okay. So just always keep in mind, think about your objective in the moment. If you are at a loss, just ask why. Like, oh, I don't really agree with you. I'd love to know where you're coming from. When you're coming into conflict situations, and we just got to try to have a little bit more grace with each other, and think about how we do it in a way that makes everyone creates more allies.
Thank you so much. So yes, empathy should go both ways, as I understand. Rebecca, were there situations that you experienced where it was very difficult to have let's say people at the decision-making level, people with power, being brought to this accomplice role and finding it difficult for them to overcome their barrier?
Yeah, so a lot of the advocacy work I do is actually outside game studios, and what I do with Pixels, what I do with Game and Color is actually kind of viewed as radical in corporate culture. Like, what do you mean you only want tickets to go to people of color? What about, like, we're excluding all of these people? Like, we can't save half our tickets for XYZ marginalized group. And that is like, even though that seems like, yes, we're obviously making place for people who don't normally have space, who are normally like 3 out of 100 people in the room is really radical and really scary to corporate culture that is not used to taking more affirmative, I don't like the word affirmative action, taking more initiative in pushing back against the status quo, because like we don't want to disturb developers in their creative process, like make our games fall behind, our games will never be shipped out. But like in order to shift the paradigms, like move the power structures a little, we have to start making people feel uncomfortable. And this is where, as Jessica mentioned, some people can fall into extremism. They will be angry, they will resent, they will like push back against like to push people out. So like, how do we include, how do we make them feel defensive, more open to listening about our experiences and messages? And there was a study saying that making this kind of diversity training optional is more effective than required. And I don't really know how I feel about that. I'm kind of like, oh, but like, how do we get people to listen if they're not normally listening? Oh, but then if we're just making them angrier, it's counterproductive. So it's kind of like a solution to this yet.
Could you repeat? We just lost you on the last sentence. We just lost you on the last sentence, sorry. Can you repeat? So it was just after the study showing about the training, making people potentially angrier. And so it was just after that, sorry.
Yeah, so a lot of mandatory training can feel for to people what things are, so it makes them angrier and more resistant. So I don't really have an answer yet. I'm still trying out different ideas. I'm trying to be like plant seeds of ideas, let people come into their own to realize that we need change. And yes, this is a good way to make change, because if I throw them in the deep end of the pool, it might feel like I'm like throwing up the blankets on the bed and like changing everything all at once. But some people feel like they're drowning and they resist. And some resistance is fine because it means that you're going in a, but we can't also alienate potentially powerful people, because in studios we're stuck within power structures and like we're trying to navigate these power structures. So having a powerful, loud eye is really important. So if we have to go and convert them little by little to becoming our powerful ally, then that is one way to go about doing it. And we all have our different strategies with our different personalities. Some of us are soldiers, warriors. Some of us use our privilege to take on all this hate, to push back against it and protect our allies. Some of us are like mages, for example, we weave these spells. And some of us are like accountants, where we are doing budgets, we are measuring success, and we need people change the way things are.
I completely agree. Thank you so much for this point of view. From what I hear, both of you really emphasize on the fact that it should not be personified. The problem should not be personified. Even as we learn about how to find solution, but even as we would like just to talk about it, or just acknowledge that there was a problem, or just notify someone that there is an issue, it should not be personified for people maybe to not get angry. There is someone who just said in the chat mentioned a quote from Jamila Jamil. We need to learn how to separate ignorance from evil. So it's really, again, the problem is not the person. The problem is about the unconscious biases and their effect. So it's not about someone being guilty or being wrong only. The way we should, the solution is not necessarily just solving one-shot situation in a room, but really attacking the problem and how we are biased and how we can actually fight against their damageable effect on underrepresented group, right?
Yes. No, definitely. And just to piggyback off of that, because so, backgrounds in social change communication, and oftentimes, so I'll go train young activists and they're the expert on their area. So really it's just like, okay, like how do we say this in a way that actually penetrates, like actually gets through? And it's really interesting because I've had a lot. I actually live in a small conservative town, and I try out a lot of stuff. I test a lot of things, and oftentimes it doesn't always work. So I try to test it first. But I found that like certain words are just triggers for people right now, and so like the understanding of racism and racist is like bad, just means that you're a bad, evil, hateful person. And so if I find that people are like, if I use the word and people have all this baggage that comes up with it and all of these defenses or whatever, same thing with privilege. So actually when I'm having conversations about race with someone, it depends where they are in their stage of change. So like if they're like, it's not a problem, I'm helpless about, like, there's all those transformational changes stages, depending on where they are, depends on the words I use. And so I actually won't use the word racism, racist, privilege in a conversation with someone, depending where they are, until I have the chance, until it's established that I'm a safe person and this is a safe place, and we can and I have the chance to actually explain what I mean by the words that I'm saying. So I actually usually, when I have race trainings, I will usually start with, you might be uncomfortable, and this is what race-based stress is. And if you feel uncomfortable at any point, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong. It's just completely natural. And then I actually go into privilege. I'm like, if I use this word privilege, it does not mean that you haven't suffered, that you haven't earned what you have, and that you don't deserve what you have. It just means your skin color hasn't been a barrier to getting there. And so I kind of like lay the playing field of like, so that just to make sure that our lexicon is the same. So if I'm using a word, that it means the same thing to me as it does to my audience who I'm talking to. And that way, again, it's just being strategic. So that way, when I'm saying things, I know that they're receiving them. Because if I say racist, racism, whatever, white privilege, and then that blocks them from hearing everything I have to say,
that
that
won't
doesn't
work. Yeah.
it doesn't work. So again, I think it's just so it's so important to and then, but if people are talking to somebody else, you can go like full force and like we have the same understanding of what we mean by racism, like has a power dynamic to it, then like let's go for it. But it's really important to understand like where the understanding of the person that you're talking to is, and to use language and make sure that they feel understood as well. Like I've had coffee with the 65-year-old white conservative guy that's like the Second Amendment, like all over, he's packing, like as we're having coffee, and I sit and actually listen to him for the first 45 minutes. And what he's talking about is everyone thinks that he's a racist because of who he votes for, and it's really painful for him. And so instead of me being like, well, you don't know pain, or like, I'm going to educate you right now and like what's really going on, I'm just going to acknowledge him. So I'm going to listen to him, acknowledge, and be like, yeah, I bet that sucks. I bet that's painful. And it takes a while, but like we actually have that one-on-one conversation. And now by the time he's ready to listen to me, because I was willing to listen to him. And one more thing I'll say on this, because I think what happens a lot of times is they're feeling that like people of color, the ownership should not always be on the people of color to have to share their pay, to have to reach out and do all of this stuff. And so if you're a person of color and you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to do that, you don't have to do that. So just to know, because I also believe that like you shouldn't have to, but I also, so it's both. It's I shouldn't have to, but sometimes I choose to because I have a certain goal in mind about the community that I want to live in and where my kids grow up, and that's why. But I just want to be careful on saying like you should always be the one that has to like reach out and have to explain to people, like that is That is
it might represent an opportunity, but it's not like you have to. It might represent an opportunity. That's what you're saying, right?
Yes, exactly.
And I really feel that it's about the vocabulary you want to use when establishing this kind of dialogue. It's really cultural. Is that also what you experience, Rebecca? The cultural aspect and the vocabulary you'd use, or what's your take? As a Montreal expert in the field.
Yeah. So it's, oh my God, I have like so many ideas, so many thoughts. So even in Montreal, the word racism, race, is still something that's really scary to white people, especially in games. They're like, no, I'm not, or no, there's no racism in this province. Like, there's no racism in Montreal. Montreal is progressive. Montreal is welcoming to all people. We have more immigrants in our city than anywhere else. And I kind of feel like not acknowledging it is in the same way as just not listening to what people are saying, not listening to the voices that say, yeah, racism is still alive here. Yes, sexism is still alive here. And it's like where like, I don't see color. People still say that here, and it's frustrating.
Yeah,
it's frustrating to see review happen in a place that's supposed to be multicultural, that's supposed to be welcoming, and it just means we have a lot of work to do. We still have to create our support networks, and creating Game in Color made me realize that there are actually more of us than I see inside the studio. Like my teams have been not that diverse. I am often like an only on my team, like either an only woman, either the only ambiguous looking person of color, and I have to be subjected to questions of like, where are you really from? Like, oh, you're a tan today. It's just like, I'm just trying to do my job. I just want to be a game piece. I don't want to have to answer these questions over and over. And creating works just allow you to leave all this baggage at the door and just be a game developer, or like have questions about race, about sexism, without having to do re-education, without having the burden of having to check my emotions or check definitions, just like letting it all out in an honest way. And in a city like Montreal, where, like, again, it's supposed to be multicultural, I still need these support networks.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's really about how we can also, it raises the question of that, representation versus equality, right? Okay, and how we can bring this to the table. We have 10 minutes left. If you'd agree, that take 5 minutes to address a question regarding the economic factor of diversity, when you already approached it a little bit. And after, we'll take a couple of minutes to answer a few questions that were asked. So regarding the economic factor, indeed, there are studies showing that diversity brings more, innovation, and is really, bringing, a boost on creativity, which is particularly one very interesting in the gaming industry. There are also studies that are starting to, to grow about the diversity of the market and how the market experience diversity. Do you have any studies you think about, or any facts that can, argue for the positive economic impact of this initiative, Jessica?
You asked me to pull out facts. I'm like, oh gosh.
That's fine. That's okay. Yes, that's okay. Maybe Rebecca, do you have some as well? And it might be also related to your, more proximal environment. Rebecca, or
I know, I'm trying to think, maybe Rebecca has some like hard, cold facts. I mean, we just see it as like I mean, it's just a no-brainer that difference leads to innovation. Like the more ideas that you have, the different experiences that you have bringing to a room, just leads to creativity. And when you actually listen to those ideas, you know, it just makes a character deeper, it makes a character more, you know, like it, you see, you know, like even on the UX front, like how someone is going to read that, you know, that you would never think like could be offensive, or like it doesn't make sense to them because like culturally things, they look at things differently or read things differently. Like it's so important. And I know there's like tons of examples, like all I can think are like peace building examples of this, but I know that there's lots of examples of like, oh, you know, I mean, it's so I mean, branding wise, I think, what was it, like a couple years ago, I can't remember if it was like H&M, I don't want to throw them under the bus if it wasn't them, but like put out a shirt of like a young Black boy that had like a monkey on the shirt. And it's like, I'm sure if there were more Black people in that room, like when that decision was made or advertised, someone would have been like, excuse me.
Yeah, maybe.
Let's switch the shirt. Let's do, yeah, no. Yeah, no. So that part of it is like, it's just, and that's why I want people to stop thinking about it as like charity. It's like, no, like I went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, like, you know, so you never know what someone's experience is. And, you know, just creating that space where you can do that. And then I also think another economic factor is also exposure that we haven't talked about either. So like actually going into high schools in low-income areas, and provide, you know, like showing what you do and like how you get paid. Like I always, like when I go present, I'm like, hey, guess what, you guys, you can make a really good living doing really good stuff in the world. Like if you just, like, it's not just like volunteer stuff, you can actually make a really good living and career. Like if you care about LGBTQ issues, if you care about race issues, if you care whatever, you can have a job that's not social worker that does that. So the same thing goes for game design. It's like, hey, do you love playing games? Guess what? You can make a good career, a lot of money doing that. And some people aren't exposed to that. Like this is like this is a very tight knit world. Like it's kind of small, it's kind of tight knit, you know. So I really encourage gaming community to like put the tentacles like out and start really getting into their communities, like talking to high schoolers, you know, doing all of that kind of stuff as well, and exposing what it's like. Because you can start, if they have the internet, they can start Khan Academy and start building stuff now, you know, and start learning how to code now and do design stuff now. And so, but they just need that exposure. So I just want to also make sure it's part of this conversation that we throw that out there.
I think that typically, you know, when reaching out to communities, I guess, of course, Rebecca, you're very familiar with that. You know, how does this economic factor, you know, comes in line with you know, trying to promote diversity and inclusive initiatives?
So like Jessica mentioned, outreach is so important. It just makes like a long-term ripple effect kind of impact in who can see themselves as game developers, who can see themselves in this viable career path. They may not know that there are free tools out there, tools that don't require powerful computers to start making games right now, that they don't need to be a superstar programmer or a superstar 3D modeler. They can make games with like Bitsy, for example, where you don't need to be Monet, you don't need to be #1 hacker. You can just make a game, and it doesn't even need to be a profitable game. It could be a game about self-expression. It could be a game where you just go Easter egg hunting. So like showing different kinds of people the possibilities of game development means that different kinds of people will later on come in to games. So if you do outreach with your studio, I suggest going to areas, like talking to your communications team, talking to the people who line up these high school talks, these collegiate talks, especially now that we have the power of doing this stuff virtually, we can reach areas that we normally would not inspire because they're not conveniently located 20 minutes from the studio.
Yes, that's not an issue anymore. So thank you so much on this view. So we have 2 questions that are asked regarding diversity and inclusion. I will try to merge if Rachel and this other Anonymous and Tandy accept that, but I think they are very well related. So I will try to merge them. How to deal with coming in as a visible minority in a new company and be careful, and eventually having to face with people who pretend to listen, but who actually don't. That's a very difficult one. What do you think, Rebecca?
So the question, if I understand it, is you're a minority in your team. And so how to succeed in this kind of environment and manage these kinds of people who are allies, but not really allies.
Yeah.
Wow, that's it's really hard because it's like something that'll weigh on you every single day. That'll be like your daily dose of paper cuts. And like I've been in that position and it hurts and it's like a constant source of frustration. And if you're unable to convince your teammates that to care about you, to include you in their conversations, to think about you in a more respectful way, if you're able to, and if you're comfortable, I think this is a conversation to have with your manager or a peer colleague, like someone to vent to about your situation. It'll help you feel a tiny bit better, and maybe they'll have solutions of their own that have worked with these people. Maybe they even actually worked with them before and were able to just get along with them. I've worked with some people that were extremely frustrating to deal with, that were like, it felt like they didn't respect me. It felt like they didn't take me seriously. And it an entire year to actually get them on my side. And I was pretty much angry about this person for like the whole year until he started to actually realize that I knew what I was talking about. But it took a year of enduring this to get there. So it's about your like personal tolerance level. It's about like, do you want to confront this person? Do you want to speak to your manager about this? Are you comfortable doing that yet? And if you're not comfortable in like rocking the ship, for example, because maybe you're in a junior position, I would find a support network outside of work.
I was going to come to that because typically, I mean, if I might share just a little bit, how amazingly supportive it was to reach out to one of your association when I moved to Montreal. External support can exist even you're lonely in a studio, right? What's your take, Jessica? We just have maybe 1 minute left. Celia agrees with that, to not, delay too much on the other. So Jessica, what's your take? And after I take a few seconds to thank you both. Go.
Yes. So my only take on that is my advice to you is to slay. And it's not fair, but you're probably going to have to do better than everybody else. And you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. So you're just going to have to go in and slay and make friends. And as you make friends, make sure those friends see you first, and you know that they're safe. But yeah, that's basically my advice. Go in, slay as much as you can, make friends, and then make sure that they see you. And then you can start making some of those changes, but focus on slaying.
Comes through. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I was very excited to have you. I learned a lot with you, and I really hope, and yeah, it shows a little bit in the chat, but I hope the audience was as excited as I was to listen to you. It's such an important subject, and I thank you for your amazing contribution, not only in the industry, but also specifically to this panel. Thank you so much, Celia. I'll give you the mic in order to follow with the program. Thank you both, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye,
It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving your time and coming here and giving us your insights. So it was super interesting, and it's quite frustrating actually to see all the things that people need to do get the fair share and to be listened to. It's very enraging and yeah, thank you for your insight and I hope that things are gonna get better fast because it's about time. Thank you very much.
We see
Melissa,
progress.
Yes, yeah, I mean,
we see progress. They're here. So
yes.
Let's go.
Let's do it. Thank you so much, Melissa. Bye-bye.